Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Danielle Chrisman. I'm the project manager for the Canadian Dementia Learning and Resource Network, or CDLearn for short. CDLearn is a knowledge hub led by the Schlegel UW Research Institute for Aging and is funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada under the Dementia Community Investment, DCI. These projects are funded by the Dementia Community Investment, and they focus on the development of innovative tools, resources, and approaches that enhance the well-being of people living with dementia and care partners by increasing awareness, support, knowledge, and understanding of dementia. These innovations, like My Tools for Care in Care, are shared broadly to support dementia policy and practice across Canada. We're pleased to be able to co-host this webinar today with the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and the Northwest Territories.
Thank you so much for being here today. I would like to begin by acknowledging the land and First Peoples from the Treaty Territories where our team leads institutions are located, including McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee Nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Both the University of Alberta and University of Saskatchewan are located on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota, Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, and Ojibwa Saulteaux Anishinaabe nations, and homeland of the Métis Nation of Alberta. The University of Montreal is situated on land where the Great Peace of Montreal was signed in 1701, a treaty between France, its Indigenous allies, and the Haudenosaunee Federation. Finally, the University of Manitoba is located on Treaty 1 territory, the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories and acknowledge the extensive and ongoing harms and mistakes that occur when the original spirit of the treaty agreements is not honored. I have mixed Métis, Polish, French, and Irish ancestry. I benefit daily from several positions of privilege. I'm white passing, was given opportunity to be raised by my parents in a safe and loving home where my family earned 6 figures. I have had extensive opportunities to receive university education, and I work in stable employment where I have a voice and autonomy in my work. My great-great-aunt Nan Mackay is celebrated as the first Indigenous woman to graduate from the University of Saskatchewan. However, until relatively recently, these roots have not been publicly celebrated by my family or by powerful institutions. Historically, these roots have been rejected or downplayed or ignored, limiting my understanding of myself, my family, and my unique and personal responsibility to resist assimilation. My research is focused on relationships, and I want to learn together with Indigenous communities about how to support meaningful connection, and I have much to learn. Today, as we discuss the story of My Tools for Care in Care, we do so from a place of humility. We hope that the toolkit is helpful, and it is a strength that it was developed in partnership with carers of people living with dementia. It also has limitations. It was not developed in partnership with Indigenous peoples or other non-white carers. We have an ongoing responsibility to seek broader and more diverse perspectives as to how to best support people living with dementia and their family, friends, and care partners in our work. Before I pass it off today to Christine to provide some greetings on behalf of the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories.
So my name is Christine McWilliam with the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories. And on behalf of the Society, I would like to welcome you to this knowledge translation event. I've been working with the research team since the beginning of the project and thrilled that My Tools for Care in Care is now publicly available on our Assant Cafe. Today, you'll learn more about the story of this online toolkit, beginning with how My Tools for Care in Care was developed to support care partners of persons living with dementia. The researchers will discuss how they collaborated with care partners to develop and evaluate the My Tools for Care in Care toolkit, and will then explain their findings. Part of this presentation will be communicated in French, as we just saw, with English translation to describe the process of translating and adapting the My Tools for Care in Care into French. Finally, you'll hear about the next steps in this project, including the plan to promote the toolkit across Canada. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Wendy Duggleby from the University of Alberta, who will describe how this story began. Thanks.
Thank you, Christine. Hi, everyone. My Tools for Care in Care actually started in 2016, so a little while ago. And it was because we received a request from caregivers of persons with dementia who were residing in long-term care. We had previously adapted and developed a toolkit called My Tools for Care for caregivers of persons living with dementia in the community. So what we set out to do in multiple stages is work with care partners, and based on what they told us and based on their needs, adapt My Tools for Care. And then it became My Tools for Care in Care. So next slide. So to tell a story, we thought it best to go right into My Tools for Care in Care and show you what it looks like. So you can see that it's housed on the Asante Cafe website, and the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta Northwest Territories had developed the site and worked with us, Christine in particular, to add both My Tools for Care, which you see there, and My Tools for Care in Care. So what you do when you go to this site, you click on My Tools for Care in Care. Next slide, please. Then you see this page, and it shows My Tools for Care in Care, and it shows 4 sessions. And caregivers can choose whatever session they want to use at any time. You don't have to do them all in a row. So the first session is About Me, and About Me houses activities that caregivers can do to help them deal with the significant changes they experience. Session 2 is Common Changes to Expect. And in this session, we share stories of caregivers, what it's like for them, and both quotes and stories and what they've done to help themselves. And then frequently asked questions is the next session. And what we did here with caregivers and with the research team is we put together a list of frequently asked questions and then some potential answers to it. And of course, session number 4 is resources. So next slide, please. So one of the things the caregivers said to us that was missing and they wanted in was they wanted to know how to deal with the tremendous guilt they're feeling. So we developed this activity for caregivers. It's called How Can I Manage the Guilt That I Feel? Next slide, please. The other thing the caregivers said they wanted is they wanted to know how to work with staff. So we put together this activity called Working Together to help them think about how they might work with staff in long-term care facilities. Next slide, please. They also asked us about how they could advocate for the care of their family or friend that's residing in long-term care. So again, we put together this activity for them to use to help them learn how to advocate for care. Next slide, please. And here's the other one we added, goals for care at the end of life, because again, this was a request, particularly for caregivers with persons residing in long-term care, about how to deal with issues at the end of life. So this is another activity where they can start to think about, start to write questions, start to try and find information about goals of care at the end of life. Next slide, please. In the resources section, we added some more information. And for example, we developed tip sheets. Now, the tip sheets that we developed, you can see here, preparing for the future, older adults and loneliness, tips for downsizing your home. All of them and everything in the resources have to be evidence-based. And they have to be something that can be used nationally, because My Tools for Care in Care is meant to be a national intervention. Next slide, please. And then we did a feasibility study with some excellent results, and we published this, you can see, in the Pilot of Feasibility Studies. It's an open access journal, so people can go ahead and access and printed it off, but it was found at that time to be both feasible and acceptable to caregivers. So now I'll return to Dr. Hannah O'Rourke from the University of Alberta, and she'll tell us how My Tools for Care in Care might help caregivers experiencing loneliness. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wendy. So we were so excited about My Tools for Care in Care and about its potential. And we wondered whether it would also help with addressing another significant problem that carers can face. So in our work, we found that loneliness is a significant concern for carers of a person who's living with dementia and long-term care. For example, carers have discussed how they missed sharing day-to-day life with the person living with dementia, and this can lead to feelings of loneliness when they were alone at home. So I'll read a quote from a carer now, that there's a couple up on the screen. I come here, visit her and go home. She's always in the back of my mind. What is she doing now? Is she okay? So we knew loneliness was an issue. And so with some funding from the Public Health Agency of Canada, we invited carers from Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, and Ontario to help us further improve My Tools for Care in Care. One of our first steps was to talk with carers specifically about their experiences of loneliness and to look carefully at all of the elements of My Tools for Care in Care to see if it would offer the kind of support that could help to address loneliness. From their feedback, we could tell that social support was especially important to carers. Social support helps people to feel included, and it also prevents loneliness. And this is something that's quite well known from other literature. So we were excited to find that My Tools for Care in Care may be a way, that may be a toolkit that can offer social support. I'll read a quote that highlights the importance of supportive communities. There were circles of people who'd gone through this thing, and meeting you guys at the tea house, you form your own community here. So when we carefully reviewed all parts of the toolkit, we found that there were many elements which already provided social support, which was very encouraging to us. For example, the toolkit includes illustrative quotes from carers about their experiences, which can help a person feel validated. Carers can see that they are not alone when they observe that other carers experience similar challenges. The carers did talk about how, on the one hand, it was so important to have a community of support, and on the other, that it can be actually very challenging to build a community of support and maintain your community of support. We added a new activity called Building Your Network. It prompts carers to try to reach out to their existing networks or find new connections. Because this can be very difficult for a whole variety of reasons, this activity provides some tips to make that a little bit easier. We also added 4 films describing carers' experiences, and these are in the What to Expect section of the toolkit, and you can see them here highlighted in blue. It can be really helpful to hear about other people's experiences to validate what you are going through. And this kind of validation is actually a form of emotional support. Carers that we spoke with had different experiences. There was no one experience. And so we made several films. One of these films may resonate with your own experience, and you can access them at any time. But today we're going to take a few minutes to listen to some of Edith's experiences before moving to the next speaker. So I just need to actually navigate quickly to the video. So I just need to stop sharing for a moment here. And we'll hear a bit from, oops, I think I did that wrong. Sorry, forgot to share sound. It won't work, we can't hear sound. Okay, we'll hear from Edith.
I always wanted to keep him home, you know, if I could.
After she knew her husband had dementia, Edith cared for him for 5 years in their home.
It was exhausting.
But then he suffered a stroke. After his release from hospital, he went straight into long-term care. He's been there for about a year now.
When he went into the nursing home, it was an absolute relief. I was so happy about him being in a good place, and happy that he was safe and that I was safe. I have a nursing background. I went in there. Of course, my little evil eye was looking all around. Is this done? Is that done? But I worked very hard not to criticize the staff. I never did that. I always gave them lots of support. Sit and hold hands. He loves to hold hands. He likes the physical stuff, which is why I do the shaving and, you know, massage his feet, and because that's what he doesn't get when he's in long-term care. I'd also sing to him so that we could dance in his room, which we did. Sometimes when I went in there, he didn't know me, and I never pressed him. He only knew that somebody was there who cared for him. In fact, he asked me to marry him one time. But there came a time when I couldn't move him on my own. So the whole thing had to change. I had to give up most of the stuff I was doing for him and leave it to the staff. And I must say I was very, very sad at that time and realized that I was no longer really necessary. It was a down period for me, and so I kind of just retired to my house and tried to figure out what was going on. And finally I decided that I was going through a normal period of mourning, more loss. Realized it was probably a good thing because it made me sit down and think, he is never coming home. I cannot provide some of the care, and I have to trust them. They were excellent. Every time there was a change, they would phone me.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm just going to share my slides again, and next we will hear from Dr. Pamela Baxter from McMaster University, who will tell us more about some of the results from testing the effects of My Tools for Care and CARE in a larger study.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and I apologize that my video is not working this afternoon. But I want to share with you what we have done, and just wait for the slides to catch up a wee bit, and then we'll start. What a lovely video of Edith sharing, and I would encourage everybody to go on and see the rest of that video and the other videos as well. Okay, thank you, Hannah. So we recently conducted a pragmatic trial and with the goal of evaluating the effectiveness of My Tools for Care and Care Toolkit. And if you want to know about the study methods, please see our publication. You'll see it here on the screen. We just don't have time to go through all the particulars, but I would encourage you to look at that. Next slide. So our recruitment began in February of 2020, and as you can appreciate, that was right at the start of the pandemic. So we had discussions as a team on whether or not to continue recruitment, and we decided that it was important to pursue this work for a few reasons. First, we recognized that the study came at a very difficult time for caregivers and that not recruiting may actually deprive the caregivers from a valuable resource that could actually help them feel more supported. Secondly, we had faith in the tool's ability to have a positive impact on those that engaged with it in a meaningful way. And finally, we wanted to insert much needed support into homes where many of the social and healthcare supports may have been withdrawn due to some of the pandemic restrictions. So needless to say, in the midst of the pandemic, we needed a variety of strategies to get carers to participate in the study. And so we made the decision to move forward with the recruitment, and knowing that we would need to think creatively about how to recruit participants. So we used the help of various community organizations, such as the Alzheimer's societies in each of our provinces, family councils, organizations dedicated to supporting caregivers, senior centers, and long-term care facilities, to name a few. We also had to advertise, and so we advertised in newsletters, social media. We advertised in newspapers and even got ourselves on a local television show. So we posted as well advertisements in a variety of settings where we felt carers would be, such as grocery stores, doctors' offices, maybe church bulletins, and anywhere we thought that caregivers would frequent, despite those public policies to remain inside. In Ontario alone, we utilized 165 groups and strategies to reach our target sample. So recruitment for all of our provinces was no small feat. What we were really pleased to see the end result. So in total, we had 234 caregivers who took part in the study. And here's some information about them, and you can see who participated. If I could have that next slide, please. Overall, we had the 234 participants. You can see the majority here were women that were married and living in an urban setting. 92% of those that participated were white. So if I can get the next slide, please. So when we compared those that received the My Tools for Care and Care Toolkit to those who didn't receive it after 2 months, there was a significant increase in feelings of social support. And in those who did not have access to the toolkit, there was actually a decrease in the social support that they felt after 2 months. We also found that not all of the carers who were given access to the My Tools for Care and Care Toolkit actually chose to use it. So we needed to talk with carers to get a better understanding of the benefits as well as the challenges they faced when using the My Tools for Care and Care Toolkit. So with that, now I want to introduce Dr. Genevieve Thompson from the University of Manitoba and Dr. Shelley Peacock from the University of Saskatchewan, who will share more about what we heard from this group of participants. So Genevieve.
Great, thank you so much, Pam. We found that people really liked the toolkit. They found comfort in reading through the experiences of others. One participant said, someone who has a lot of issues in their life or has a hard time coping with all the stressors that they're having to take over in their life, they might find this more comforting to read through some of the stuff and be comforted by it. In general, it was perceived as a very helpful resource, particularly for those who just moved into a long-term care facility. But we did receive comments about additional resources for those who had been caregiving for a long time. They still found things very helpful in the toolkit. While many participants' comments reflected the acceptability of the online nature of the toolkit, for some, it doesn't replace face-to-face connections. But what people were saying too is it was better than nothing at all. And I think we as a team have reflected a bit on this, in that this was coming at a time of COVID when everything was being shut down and families weren't being sort of allowed in to facilities anymore either. So it was a good substitute for the face-to-face. The other thing they talked about was around the usability. The online nature of the toolkit both contributed to its usability by being conveniently accessible at any time of day or night when someone wanted to log on, and its ease of navigation. But it could be a drawback. Again, think about COVID time. It was that people already had shifted to a lot online, and this was another online activity to do. And so people talked about wanting writing exercises in a paper and pencil format, which is available. People can print those activities that Dr. Duggleby talked about in that first section. They can fill it in, they can write on it. People also said they needed to be motivated to complete the information. The other piece we heard quite loudly too was that for some, putting their personal information, typing in the text boxes felt a little bit personal. They didn't want to put their personal feelings on the computer. And so we heard that comment as well. Finally, 3 areas of usefulness were identified with the toolkit. The first, and I think probably one of the most important, was that it really validated and normalized their feelings. Caregiving can be a lonely experience, fraught with uncertainty. The toolkit, as one participant said, it's nice to know you're not going through different things alone. Like, you know, you're not the only one experiencing the difficulties my wife's having or I'm having. Secondly, it helped participants realize their own well-being is important. And for some, it really highlighted that they needed more support than what they were currently receiving. One person in particular said the toolkit had prompted her to call the social worker twice in the past month, something she'd never done before. Finally, the toolkit validated to caregivers they were doing the best they could and that they have a significant wealth of knowledge. Yet, they could still be provided with additional tips on providing care, the evolving nature of dementia, and how to further engage with their family member. So the following quotes summarize these feelings really nicely. I think I was thinking about how best to use these tools to take care of myself so that I can be a caregiver to my mom. Like how to, to use them effectively and efficiently, and to just be really honest and reflective so that by doing them, that I could gain more insight into myself so that I could be a better caregiver for my mom. So overall, the qualitative findings noted that my tools for care and care helped with transitions as a new family carer into long-term care by assisting them to not feel alone. The online format of the toolkit is a strength, but participants indicated that it can't ever replace face-to-face contact and support. The toolkit was seen as very user-friendly, but options for printing hard copies and paper resources were welcome. And in general, participants really felt that the toolkit helped increase their knowledge and gave them permission for self-care, something we know that family caregivers really struggle with a lot. It now gives me great pleasure we're going to be switching over to French with Dr. Véronique Dubé. So for those, I think I'm supposed to remind, if you haven't, for those of us English, click on the interpretation button at the bottom, and you may want to now hear things in English going forward. All right, thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Geneviève. Alors, bonjour à toutes et à tous. Alors, il me fait vraiment plaisir de vous parler maintenant de la version française de l'outil. Comme il a été mentionné en anglais plus tôt, nous avons également eu l'opportunité, dans le cadre de ce projet subventionné par l'Agence de santé publique du Canada, de traduire My Tools for Care and Care de l'anglais au français. Le nom de l'outil est devenu en français la trousse du proche aidant en établissement de soins de longue durée. Nous avions donc deux grands buts dans le cadre du projet en français. La première étape était de traduire et d'adapter l'intervention La trousse du proche aidant en établissement de soins de longue durée. Et dans une deuxième étape, nous souhaitions évaluer l'acceptabilité et la faisabilité de la trousse auprès d'aidants de la communauté francophone du Canada. Alors, dans le cadre de cette présentation, je vous parlerai principalement de la première étape. Nous avons donc traduit en français, avec l'aide d'un traducteur agréé, les 4 sections de la trousse du proche aidant que nous avons vues plus tôt dans la présentation avec Wendy, soit la section 1 à propos de moi, la section 2 qui porte sur les changements fréquents auxquels se préparer, la 3e section qui est une foire aux questions et la 4e section qui porte sur les ressources. Nous avons également échangé avec le traducteur afin de vulgariser et d'adapter le plus possible la trousse au langage des aidants. Les contenus traduits ont ensuite été intégrés dans la plateforme et vérifiés avant le recrutement d'aidants francophones prenant soin d'un proche âgé de 65 ans et plus et qui réside dans l'un des 17 centres d'hébergement et de soins de longue durée d'un centre intégré universitaire de santé et de services sociaux de l'île de Montréal au Québec. Les proches aidants recrutés avaient 2 semaines pour consulter la trousse du proche aidant avant la tenue de groupes de discussion. Chaque groupe était d'une durée approximative de 60 minutes et animé par une professionnelle de recherche accompagnée d'une observatrice. Next slide, please. Nous avons recruté 12 proches aidants dont la moyenne d'âge était de 59 ans. La majorité étaient des femmes dont la langue première était le français. Ces aidants, dont 7 étaient toujours sur le marché du travail, s'occupaient en forte proportion d'un parent dont l'âge moyen est de 84 ans, qui est admis en CHSLD depuis déjà plus de 30 mois. Next slide, please. Les données recueillies ont été analysées selon 3 grandes catégories. Le contenu de la trousse du proche aidant, c'est-à-dire ce qu'ils ont préféré ou le moins aimé des thèmes abordés. Nous avons également regardé la structure, donc la suite logique des sujets traités à travers les différentes sections, de même que l'organisation et la durée de l'intervention. Et enfin, une 3e catégorie, le processus de l'intervention, c'est-à-dire le fonctionnement de la plateforme, la fluidité de la navigation, la facilité de se repérer dans les différents contenus proposés. Ces catégories ont été scindées entre les éléments positifs mentionnés par les aidants, mais également les éléments qui mériteraient une amélioration ou qui mériteraient tout simplement d'être ajoutés. En ce qui a trait au contenu, tout comme les aidants anglophones, ce contenu a été jugé utile, pertinent, aidant, intéressant. Les aidants nous ont toutefois mentionné ou suggéré qu'ils aimeraient avoir un peu plus d'exemples concrets. Pour ce qui est de la structure, les aidants ont souligné sa clarté et sa simplicité à utiliser. Le regroupement, par exemple, de ressources provinciales aurait été apprécié. Pour ce qui est du processus, les aidants ont mentionné apprécier la flexibilité qu'offre la trousse de pouvoir naviguer d'une section à l'autre à leur gré, sans que rien ne leur soit imposé. Ils auraient aimé, cependant, que la consultation sur un téléphone intelligent soit facilitée. Next slide, please. À votre écran, vous voyez 2 verbatims d'aidants qui traduisent les propos que nous avons recueillis durant le projet sur la trousse du proche aidant en établissement de soins de longue durée. Alors, j'ai trouvé que tout était pertinent, je n'enlèverai rien. En gros, j'ai trouvé que c'est un bel outil. Une seconde aidante a dit « Ce que j'ai trouvé très bien, c'est la vidéo sur l'espoir, les différents témoignages de gens qui vivent différentes choses. Puis je m'aperçois qu'on est tous pareils. » Next slide, please. Alors, depuis maintenant quelques jours, la trousse du proche aidant en établissement de soins de longue durée est disponible au grand public en français également. Vous pourrez y avoir accès en utilisant le code QR ou encore en vous rendant à l'adresse Internet qui apparaît à votre écran en haut à gauche. Si vous n'avez pas eu le temps de faire une capture d'écran, ces liens vous seront représentés un peu plus loin dans la présentation. Next slide, please. En conclusion, cette première étape de traduction et d'adaptation de la trousse du proche aidant en français s'est avérée nécessaire. La trousse a été perçue favorablement par les aidants, mais en plus, ce processus de consultation dans le cadre d'une activité de recherche qui se voulait participative a aussi été apprécié par les aidants, notamment pour briser l'isolement dont on parlait tantôt, que les aidants peuvent vivre et contribuer aussi à la normalisation au partage des sentiments vécus. La part de ces aidants a été considérable pour assurer la bonification de la trousse en français. Cette étape d'adaptation en français, avant l'évaluation de l'acceptabilité et de la faisabilité de l'intervention en français, est cruciale pour permettre de bonifier la trousse. Alors, je les remercie chaleureusement de leur rapport. Nous avons eu aussi pu bénéficier d'un formidable comité consultatif avec des représentants des communautés francophones de l'Alberta, de la Saskatchewan, du Manitoba, de l'Ontario et évidemment du Québec. Je tiens également à les remercier. Ce comité nous a permis de rejoindre des personnes proches aidantes qui s'expriment en français à travers le Canada et d'attester de leur réalité, et pas seulement au Québec, pour évaluer le bénéfice de la trousse. Nous venons d'ailleurs tout juste de terminer cette phase d'évaluation. Nous vous invitons à notre tour à un webinaire en français qui se tiendra le 20 mars prochain, où nous exposerons les résultats de cette étape évaluative. Pour en savoir davantage sur ce webinaire, n'hésitez pas à nous contacter à l'adresse courriel que vous sera présentée à la fin de la présentation. Je cède maintenant la parole à Jennifer Swindle, qui est coordonnatrice du projet et qui nous guidera sur les prochaines étapes de la trousse du proche aidant en établissement de soins de longue durée. Next slide, please. I would now like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Swindle, Research Coordinator, who will guide us through the next step of My Tool for Care and Care.
Thank you very much, Veronique. I'll just pause for just a moment as we're going to be switching over from French to English. Okay, My Tools for Care and Care is now publicly available in English and French through Assant Cafe. On this slide, you will find links to the individual toolkits and also a QR code that goes to the education page where both toolkits are found. Now that the toolkit is available, we need to tell people about it so it will be used now and into the future. We have developed a detailed sustainability plan, which serves as our roadmap to promoting its use across Canada. Some examples of what is in this plan include developing connections with key communities, sharing our work at public events like this one, and sharing different kinds of knowledge products for different audiences. For example, we have created one-page summaries of research findings, infographics such as the ones on this slide, and are currently creating a flyer and Facebook ad. Our advisory committees have told us that one of the main ways we can promote use of My Tools for Care and Care is to embed the link and information about the toolkit within materials that carers already receive. Next slide, please. For example, care homes may have orientation materials that they provide to carers of new residents, or primary care or home care providers may offer a booklet with resources when someone is diagnosed with dementia. If you have a resource in mind where you would like to see My Tools for Care and Care highlighted, or just want more information about My Tools for Care and Care, please contact us so that we can share materials with you, such as our infographics. We are also currently developing promotional videos in English and in French, which should be available for distribution by the end of summer. The best way to contact us is by email. For more information, you can contact us at mt4cic@ualberta.ca. Now, before taking questions, we would like to thank our funder, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and to acknowledge our full research team, many of whom you have met today. We thank all of the research assistants and research staff who have worked with us over the past 4 years, and also send a very special thank you to our advisory committee members from across the country who generously provided their time feedback, and support of this project. Their contributions have been critical to the success of our work. Thank you so much. We would now be happy to take any questions.
Maybe I will ask a question, which is, if you were beginning this project today, what would you do differently if you were starting from scratch today? Like, what have you learned that you would love to kind of have done differently, maybe knowing about the pandemic or not?
Wendy, I wonder if you want to think about that, because you've been developing this for many, many years.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thanks for that question. I think if on what I wished we'd had at the very beginning was more time. We got, and it was amazing what we were able to do. Amazing what we heard through the focus groups, just so very much. And I can't tell everyone how much we appreciated that and all the things they said. Because there was such an interest too, right? Yeah, I think it would have, in terms of its development, I think that would have been the luxury. A bit more time would have been good. And as Hannah mentioned, I think if we could have done it not in a pandemic, those things you can't change, just like time you can't. And we're actually extremely grateful to Public Health Agency of Canada for funding us and letting us do that. I know time is always a critical thing. So I just wanted to add those two things. Otherwise, I think the method, I don't know if everybody else would agree with me, the method really worked in adapting My Tools for Care. Like, we got such great help, and our advisory committees were outstanding, helping us along the way too. I think that would have been good.
Yeah,
thank you.
I would echo all that Wendy has said. I see there's some other questions, so I won't say much else, but only I think the biggest thing that I've learned in this process is, when I started, I'm a more junior researcher, and I thought, we've got this great big study funded. By the end of it, we'll probably be done with this toolkit. But I've really learned that there's just so much to continue to learn. We've got a toolkit that I think can be really helpful. And also, I think our team has a lot of ideas about how we want to keep working with it. And there's more ideas for adaptations and things over the coming years. So I guess that's what I've learned, is the work is never done.
I think we've opened the floodgates now. Now there's lots of questions. It's always the way. Matthew asked, how does your tool align with the new long-term care home standards?
That's a tricky question. I wonder if Matthew has a particular element around those standards that is in your mind with that question, or if others have given more thought to this.
Sure, maybe I'll allow Matthew the opportunity if he wants to add a little bit more detail in the chat or ask another question, but I can summarize from a couple other questions. People were wondering about if there's a brochure or print materials that can be given to family members when they have a loved one move into care, or something that could be included in a move-in package.
I'll start, and then maybe Jenny can fill in any gaps that I've missed. So this is something that we've been talking a lot about as a team, because our advisory committees have been talking to us a lot about, it's wonderful that you have a link that's publicly available, but people have to find the link. And so we've been really giving this a lot of thought as to how do we integrate our advertisement of My Tools for Care in Care into the usual processes that are already existing. So at the moment, we've developed the one-page summaries. I don't necessarily think that would be the best fit for like an orientation package for caregivers going whose loved one is going into a care home, but it could be. The other thing is the infographics. So those are something that might be useful within in that kind of a venue. Over the next couple of coming months, we are also planning to develop a brochure and some other social media type products, potentially a postcard. If you do have ideas about other KT products that you could see fitting really well within your organization, we'd love to hear about those as well, because we do have some time now for the next few months to really develop some more of these products to share. Jenny, do you have anything else to add to that?
You beautifully summarized everything I was thinking about. But yes, it's definitely on our list to create either a brochure, and we've heard about postcards, maybe one-page flyers that would provide a little bit of information in the link to the toolkit as well. But if there's anything that any ideas that you have, there is that website, that email address, the mt4cic@ualberta.ca. Please reach out to us because we'd be happy to, if there's something that you think would be good to bring into your organization, we'd be very happy to hear from you, and we're open to some suggestions as well.
I'd also like to, just before we go to the next question, a big shout out to Stephen Hall, who's our KT specialist and has been doing all the work to develop all of these products. So when I say we, I mean, we will collect your ideas and share them with Stephen for him to do the magic.
There's so many great questions. There's a great one about whether there might be an opportunity for expanding the resource for families that have had their loved one in long-term care for a longer length of time, where this isn't a new experience for them. Is that something that the team has considered?
So just anyone else from the team, please feel free to jump in. But actually, sometimes people get confused with the idea of My Tools for Care in care being for someone who's just moved. And actually, it's not developed for that. So that if we're thinking about transitions, that move is one kind of transition. And then there's all sorts of other transitions or changes that carers of a person living with dementia experience when the person is living with dementia in a long-term care home. And My Tools for Care in care is already designed to support people through many of those transitions. So I would say it's already intended kind of to not just be for when someone first moves in, although we'd like people to have access to it at that early juncture, because there may be parts of it that are really helpful early on in the journey, and then as they go on, they might find that there's other aspects of the toolkit that become more important. And that's another feature, I guess, of the toolkit, is that it's self-administered. So you pick and choose which parts are helpful at those different junctures. If anyone else wants to jump in, feel free.
No, I was just going to support your answer, Hannah. That's what we heard in the qualitative comments, that it helped people in multiple time points along their journey, not just that move in, but we're really working hard to try and capture those people that are moving in as well.
That's great, thanks. So there, Matthew was able to clarify just a bit more about the questions about the new long-term care home standards. And this is specific to Ontario, so I wonder if Pam would be willing to take that one on. The question was more around the average hours of care that are to be provided to a resident. So I believe the new standard, 3 hours and 42 minutes of direct care, and that will be March 2024 coming into effect. Not to put you on the spot, Pam, maybe others want to jump in as well.
I can jump in while Pam is thinking if she's got anything else.
Sorry, can you hear me? My apologies. So thank you so much for the question. I don't think in terms of the hours provided, I don't think that has a direct impact. However, I was busy typing a response to that, Matthew, in that I do think that it is extraordinarily helpful for the resident focused care, which is really one of the new ways of looking at it rather than in an institutional model, in that the toolkit allows the individual carer to reflect on their own experiences, to recognize the challenges they face, but the resources and the sorts available to them. So in that way, it allows them to come to the resident with maybe some more energy or maybe some more understanding to what they're feeling. So in that way, it could promote quality resident care. And also one of the components in the toolkit is really about communicating with the care providers, the formal care providers, dealing with conflict, because the carers talked a lot about that, not knowing when and how to interject when they have concerns or just questions. So in that regard as well, I think that the toolkit's very helpful. So I know that's a broad answer, but yeah, it doesn't directly impact on the number of hours of care. But does that help, Matthew?
That's great. Great answer. There's so many questions. It's hard to choose. We just have about 1 minute. I've got one question I'll ask, and I'm going to share in the chat. We have a link for a post-event survey that we would love to get your feedback on. So I'll put that link in the chat for everyone. You'll also get a reminder email 24 hours from now that will include a link to that. So if you miss it now, it'll come to you later. There was a question about bereavement resources and considerations that are directed to care partners after they experience the death of a person that they've been providing care to.
So we do have a section in the resources section of the toolkit, which have some resources that are related to bereavement. I wonder if, I think it's Shelley that has a bunch more knowledge on this. I wonder if you want to speak to that.
So bereavement is often when someone dies in long-term care, that's, kind of the end, and there isn't always, follow up with family. It depends on the home. Sometimes there's lots of relationship established, but one of the resources in my Tools for Caring Care is a bereavement tool that was developed, but it's for spouses, actually. So future research has to do work with adult children because their experience is a bit different. But there is my tool there, Reclaiming Yourself, and it is for spouses whose wife or husband died in long-term care, and it helps them sort of walk through their transition in their grief. But certainly it's not as well understood. And I think sometimes the perception is, their caregiving has ended and, their relative is no longer in long-term care, but really they're, embarking on sort of resolving a lot of the grief that they've maybe been experiencing that they haven't had time just yet. So still more work to be done, but there is a tool there for spouses specifically.
This has been a very, very fast hour. This has been wonderful, so informative, so many amazing questions. As I said, there will be a follow-up email with a survey. There's an opportunity in the survey if you have additional questions that you would like to ask the team. You can ask those there, and that's a way to stay in touch. And many of you would have received an invitation for this through the CD Learn newsletter or through the newsletter for the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories. So you can stay in touch that way. And we will also, if the My Tools for Care and Care team has anything additional that they'd like to send out, we're able to do that as well. So thank you. Any parting words from Hannah or Wendy, anyone?
Just thank you so much for having us, and thank you to everyone for being here with us today. And we do welcome your emails if you have questions or want more information. Thank you.